Hello, it's John Esser Sports Channel where you get everything Championship, League One and running. And today it is round 7 review. And we're going to get straight in here with Plymouth versus Luton. And I thought Plymouth were very clinical, very well planned. Their play was absolutely superb, whereas Luton just didn't seem to have that technical ability in the final third, and they just didn't have that clinical finish. And most people were saying a Luton win. There were one or two saying a Plymouth draw, and I do remember saying, yeah, Plymouth could actually get a draw from this. I can see where people were coming from. They've been playing really, really well, and Rooney seems to have got them gelling quite well. What were you all saying? You were all saying 2-1, 2-0, 1-1, a couple of you. So I went with a 2-1, similar to most of you. Plymouth 1, Luton 2, and it was Plymouth 3, Luton 1. So that great gameplay by Plymouth worked, and it was at home. And Plymouth fans will remember from last year, they were absolutely superb scoring at home, weren't they, last season? So yeah, maybe it's a turnaround for Plymouth. We go to Blackburn versus QPR next. I don't think the red card made any difference. Blackburn were always in the driving seat here. QPR from the start just didn't have that final ball. Was dreadful. And if they'd have had that final ball, even slightly better than what it was, they would have been in this game. But the final ball for me did this game for QPR, I'm afraid. I don't think the red card made much difference. We were all set, or you were all saying 1-0 to Blackburn, 2-0 to Blackburn, 2-1 to Blackburn. I went with the lower scoring side of that, so I went with Blackburn 1, QPR 0, and it was Blackburn 2, QPR 0. So we got a good result there. Derby County Norwich, well, obviously that ball was definitely out. The only saving grace is the fact that the linesman was on the wrong side of the pitch to see it. But you really should be getting these balls out conditions correct at this level. The Championship shouldn't have things like this happening. We were all looking at, we were saying 2-2s, 2-1s to Norwich. Norwich haven't been playing very well. They've got an awful lot more class in their side than what they're showing at the minute. And there was a theme to this game, I think, and that's the best I can say. With everybody thinking we can't really split them because Derby's doing better than we expected and Norwich aren't doing as well as what we thought, and they're sort of like technically probably about even. I went with a 2-2 draw. It was It was Derby 2, Norwich 3. So wrong result, but that ball was out, so it should have been 2-2. And both defences were poor. I thought both those defences. At first, I noticed Norwich defence being poor, and then throughout the game, you started seeing Derby doing silly things in defence and thinking, why are you going to got two people back there? You're going to get beaten. And I think that's why there were so many goals, because both defences were, to me, quite poor. Wednesday versus West Brom. Now, this is an interesting one because I think I saw one person say a draw because Wednesday have been improving of late. And most of you, though, were saying 2-1, 2-0 to West Brom because obviously they're high flying. Why shouldn't they win it? But West Brom's finishing and final feed into the final foot, especially the feed, was dreadful. But the finishing, where was it? That was not top of the Championship final finishing. And you could see where things were going wrong for West Brom, and I'm actually quite surprised they got the goals they did. And Wednesday, I went with everybody else. Wednesday 1, West Brom 2. It was 3-2 to Sheffield Wednesday. again, I can see why West Brom let in three, um, because Wednesday were quite clinical in that final third, and but I can't really see how they managed to score two, because their finishing was actually quite poor, and had they actually finished better, hell, they could have scored 3, 4, 5 goals there. Um, so we didn't get that one right. Hull City versus Cardiff, and another one we got wrong. 3-2, 2-0, um, and everybody's saying it's going to be a whitewash for Hull City, and it was. It was Hull City 4, Cardiff 1. But Cardiff have been playing quite well for me, and I thought that they sort of almost started to turn it round, and the defence looked quite good. But how wrong could I be? It was Hull. I went again. I played my joker here. Hull City 0, Cardiff 0. I said, and it was Hull City 4, Cardiff 1. And all I can say is the Cardiff defence, was it asleep? I mean, most of the times, I think, yeah, every time that ball went through, they just stood still, and it was like, well, hang on, wake up, come on, chop chop, get, tackling them, come back and mark, didn't seem to work for me, and it obviously didn't, because it was 4-1. Leeds Coventry next, and people are all saying 2-0, 3-1, 3-0. I went with most of you saying 2-0 to Leeds. It was 3-0 to Leeds. The only thing that I could say here is that whenever Leeds attack, it was as if Coventry were giving them too much. They were giving them that. You're the Premier League side. We're gonna give you a little bit of space, a little bit too much respect. That's the word, and they just seemed to act like scared rabbits. It came close and they'd be in panic, and you're thinking, no, stop panicking. There was far too much panicking in that Coventry defence. So less respect to the top teams, and they would have been in that game, and they could have even have won it, because Leeds weren't that clinical, not really. But yeah, it finished Leeds 3, Coventry 0. We got the right result, not the right score. That was good. Borough Stoke next, and everybody's saying that it was going to be Borough win 2-1, 1-0. I thought that defence was a little bit better than that. I thought 1-0 to Borough would be quite a decent score. I think Stoke's defence is quite good, but we keep getting mistakes in the back, and Borough's attack can score, but not very often at the minute. In the end, it was Borough 2, Stoke 0, and all that game I kept looking at it and thinking, Stoke's offside trap just isn't working, and it didn't. And I'm not a fan of offside traps. As a fan, I don't like it when I sit there and see the game is full of offside traps. Especially when it gets offside, both teams are playing the offside trap, and I've seen that with Rotherham years ago. And you're like, I'm getting bored. It's in the middle, because as soon as you play it forward, it's offside. So didn't work for Stoke. 2-0 defeat away at Borough. And that was a correct result, of course. Millwall versus Preston, 3-1s, 0-1s, red card for Millwall. Again, I don't think that made any difference. It was too late on. I went with some of you, because it was quite 50-50 this. The people couldn't quite. They didn't expect a draw, but they expected one of them to win. I went with Millwall, because I've seen them improve over the last few games, and I went 1-0 to Millwall. It was 3-1 to Millwall, so correct result. That Preston North End back line was really high, and they weren't playing the offside trap, but they were very, very high, and again, that really did put pay to them. They tried to do high press, they tried to do a high back line. To me, that was what killed Preston. So we got the right result, not the right score again. Oxford versus Burnley, and Burnley were just not clinical enough. That final shot was not of Premier League standard, and I don't think it was of top Championship standard either. 0-0 it was. We all plumped for Burnley. I've got 0-2, 1-3, 0-3s. I went with most of you, Oxford 0, Burnley 3, and it was 0-0. And purely, I think, because Burnley's finishing was just not clinical enough at the end of the day. Portsmouth, Sheffield United, and a lot of people going for Sheffield United 2-1, 2-0, 1-0. I did see a couple of 1-1s. Well done, those people who said 1-1, because actually you got the correct result. I went with a 0-0. I went with a 0-3. No, I went with Burnley 0. I went with Oxford 0, Burnley 3, and it was 0-0. And I think that that was probably a fair result, with Burnley not being clinical enough. Portsmouth versus Sheffield United, and that's Portsmouth's my local team just down the road, and I thought this was a really good game. This was a Championship game of football. Portsmouth were really good. Sheffield United were really good. It was end-to-end football. I enjoyed watching this game as a person who doesn't actually support either team, even though it is down the road. A neutrals game. This really was. This was a brilliant game to watch. Enjoyed it. 0-0 was probably the right result, to be honest. Although, it certainly wasn't a bore draw. Certainly wasn't. So we didn't get that right, but it was a really, really great game to watch. Well done, both sides. Watford, Sunderland, and Sunderland have been doing so well. Watford have been doing so well as well, haven't they, though? They've been on a run, and I don't think many people wanted to wipe off Sunderland, though, because their run's been a lot longer than Watford's. And I think all of you were saying Sunderland, so I went with most of you and said, with all of you. I went Watford 0, Sunderland 2, and it was actually Watford 2, Sunderland 1, and this was well matched as well. And I don't think it was as enjoyable as the Portsmouth Sheffield United game, but it was a really good game to watch, and they were well matched. I just wish there was more more flair and more something to watch, something to enjoy. I think it was a well matched game, and they were quite even. I think a draw would have been quite fair here, but Watford won it in the end, and we didn't get that result right. Finally, we got Swansea versus Bristol City, and everybody says there's going to be loads of goals here. 3-1, 2-2, 3-0. And Swansea can score, and they can score quite well when they do. Bristol City, they can play well, but they started doing this trick of playing well one week and then the next week not turning up. Which one was going to turn up, we had no idea. I went with most of you and said Swansea 3, Bristol City 1. And in the end, it was Swansea 1, Bristol City 1. And Bristol City's defence was not just not firing for me. It wasn't gelling. And I must admit, Vigouroux, wasn't he brilliant? If it wasn't for Vigouroux, there'd have been more goals in this game. I thought Vigouroux was actually quite did a really good game there, which sort of puts the idea of Bristol City weren't very good in defence. You could see in attack they were actually really good. This game could have been something like 3-1. Probably the other direction had it not been for Vigouroux. So we didn't get it right. In fact, it was a 1-1 draw. This could quite easily have been a 3-1 or 3-0 win for Bristol City. Quite easily, but Vigouroux saved the day. Great goalkeeping there. And that's my review of week 7, or round 7, and it's John S signing off.